Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Morgan, and I'm going to discuss an article that I came across on parental attachment during adolescence and how does that um, develop into romantic relationships and romantic narratives in emerging adulthood, young adulthood. What this article covered, or to begin with, this article is called "How Do I Love Thee?" It proposes a question, tries to be proposes a question. How do you love, parents, they love their kids, supposedly with all of their heart, if it's a secure attachment. But can that be too much, Is there such as loving too, obviously loving too little has its effects, but can loving too much have its effects? And we'll talk more into that later, but this article is called How Do I Love Thee? Let me count the ways parenting during adolescence, attachment styles, and romantic narratives in emerging adulthood. This article was a longitudinal study. It took about a decade to complete, and it took about 800 participants in 4 different ways. And it would give them attachment questionnaires when they were 17 in high school. Then it would follow up with them when they were 19, 23, then 26. However, by the end of the study, it started with 800, but by the time a decade later, there are only 100 participants left. But that's still enough to for a study. And to begin with, before going more into the study, I want to discuss about attachment and parenting styles. And to begin with, Erikson and Freud were very controversial. Well, Freud was controversial, but Erikson and Freud, they were one of the first psychologists to view the trajectory of, the trajectory of the lifespan, meaning that adolescence has a significant impact in adulthood and infancy has a significant in adolescence. They didn't view it as 3 concrete stages. They saw the fluidity amongst the lifespan. And a key thing with attachment, Eric is intimacy versus isolation. During young adulthood, when we're able to create interpersonal relationships on our own, do we crave intimacy, or do we stray away from it? And literature shows that parental styles has a big deal on how we develop our interpersonal skills, our intimacy when we're older. And by intimacy, I'm not referring to sexual relations. By intimacy, I'm referring to, just having confiding in someone. It could be a best friend. It doesn't have to be, a physical attraction. It's, very psychologically based and trusting. And literature says that authoritative parenting is the best, will create the most secure attachment style for a child. So that's basically like a parent that's not too strict and that's logical with their kid, who sets comfortable boundaries, or sets boundaries. Doesn't let the kid walk over them, and they still stay in charge. Rather than permissive parenting, where you let the kid walk all over you, and authoritarian, where you walk all over the kid. I'm missing one possibly, but those were the 3 ones mainly discussed in the article. And it says that authoritative is the best for secure attachment. So a brief history on attachment. Mary Ainsworth conducted this experiment called the Strange Situation, and it's basically she took infants away from their mothers for the experiment, and then they put them in a situation with a stranger, and the mother would walk in, and like the mother would go away, and like depending, and the mother would come back, and depending how the baby would act when the mother came in to find attachment. So long story short, secure attachment was when, you know, the baby was upset when the mother left and was soothed when the mother came back. And babies that showed insecure attachment were mothers who came back and the baby still wasn't soothed, or babies who displayed like no emotion at all, or a bit very apprehensive when the mother came back, was avoidant attachment. And okay, back to the study. As I mentioned, participants, it was a longitudinal study, and participants were given a questionnaire at age 17. And the questionnaire, it had three multi-sentence statements, three statements that expressed avoidant attachment, anxiety attachment, and secure attachment. And they were read those statements, and or they self-reported which statement best reflected their relationship with their parents. And in addition to that questionnaire, they were told to write a relationship-defining moment in their life. So a relationship-defining moment in their life, and they were told to do the same thing at age 26. And to see, the study hypothesized with the literature, and supporting the literature, in the sense that those with secure attachment styles would have great intimacy in young adulthood, or those with great attachment styles in adolescence with their parents would have great intimacy in young adulthood, would have a positive relationship defining moments in young adulthood, and would display secure attachments. And those who identified more with the avoidant and anxiety attachment statements in the questionnaires would be more linked with less intimacy in young adulthood and less relationship defining moments. And this study was, while there have been many studies on attachment, there's been very few that involve self-report in the narrative sense. So in the sense where participants were able to, you know, give an example of what a relationship looks like for them. And the results of the study, the researchers were backed by their hypothesis were proved correct. While the study had its hypothesis proved or reaffirmed, there are some limitations to the study, in the fact that the population wasn't very diverse. It was majority around 88% white participants, and all from the same area in Ontario, Canada, and predominantly higher middle class area. And another limitation is that the questionnaire to assess attachment in individuals only screened for anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, secure attachment. It didn't screen for disorganized attachment, which is very common, you know, and it's basically like an ambivalence towards your caregivers during adolescence, which is very real, and which honestly it could be in my opinion, it's like a combination of avoidant and anxious attachment. Um, but yeah, this literature was a very interesting. Attachment style is something that I'm really interested as in, like, as a young adult. You know, it's like, how does, like, is dating, like, what is love? Like, is love something, or is love just our attachment style getting need, or is it like something deeper? Is it deeper than that? And like dealing with clients in the future, uh, if they explain, like, interpersonal problems, oh, I'm having trouble dating, I'm having trouble finding the one. It could be a whole bunch of variables into why someone can't find a significant other. And as clinicians, it's not our job to assume and to be 100% correct all the time. But if one does display trouble, and as I said, intimacy it could be beyond romantic relationships. It is beyond romantic relationships. It could be, it's on a deeper sense. If a client's having trouble, confiding in someone, it could be due to, how they bonded with their parents in adolescence. And I'm interested in ways on how to therapeutic ways on how to heal, someone with disorganized attachment, avoidant attachment, insecure attachment. There's literature I looked at that says role playing helps, but to get to the role play part, there's a lot of emotional blocks. Those with anxious and avoidant attachment issues in adolescence, they tend to grow up with trust issues and they can develop manipulative behavior. As a future social worker, I want to do more research on attachment theory, and as it's interesting that insecure attachment, such as disorganized, avoidant, and anxious attachment styles during to your parents during adolescence can create a lot of problems creating interpersonal relationships when you're older. And humanistic therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy can work, but a client could have trouble trusting you, or they could get too attached or overly attached. And I was looking at ways that you could help clients with such dilemmas, and one was group therapy. With group therapy, it could give a client the sense of belonging that that they strive for, because those that weren't shown warmth and love and security in adolescence, they might overcompensate for that, or they might push it away once give it to them. So with group therapy, you have to be aware of counter transference amongst the members, and you don't want to make like dyadic bonds, pin members against each other and whatnot. But it could give people with attachment problems, a sense of belonging to another group. And basically, in future practice, once I establish a solid rapport with the client, I wouldn't mind diving deeper into a client's adolescence if they're struggling with relationships, interpersonal connections in young adulthood or adulthood in general. Because you could use cognitive behavioral therapy for closure for grief in adolescence. And there's ways where that lack of warmth and love doesn't define all relationships, all ways of loving. So you can change the framework of your client's perspective, and that don't push away warmth, love, and affection. Sometimes it's given to you genuinely, and it's beneficial for you, and that uh, your past and adolescence doesn't define you. That your relationship with your parent doesn't define you. While it's impactful, there's ways you could grow from it and learn from it, and get closure if needed.